kind of nice to have a day to kind of digest everything we saw. And Don, especially for game one, I'm especially interested. I mean, I got a bunch of notes to run through with you. And full disclosure for everybody who's here as we talk about Iowa's 40-0 win against Illinois State inside Kinnick Stadium Saturday. Full disclosure, Coach and I have not talked about the game, and this is deliberate. I was going to call you last night, Don, but after I finished watching the game, I thought we need to make this as organic as possible. I want to express myself freely on here, and I don't want anybody to get the idea that this is a biased commentary between two people who have discussed it prior. So I guess if you don't mind, Don, because a lot of viewers who are here have already heard your perspective on the game. I did not go back and watch. I caught a little bit of the show with Kyle last night, but I did not go back and watch it in its entirety. So let me just kind of recap to everybody my response to what we saw yesterday, if you don't mind, Don.
Absolutely.
And I guess I want to start with the opening quarter. And this isn't a surprise to anybody. I was obviously very disappointed in Iowa's push up front. I thought the offensive line struggled to control the line of scrimmage through the first half, especially that first quarter. I'm interested to get your perspective on how much the talented linebacker core over at Illinois State, how much of a factor that was, they were, as it relates to Iowa struggling to get that run game going. And I've been saying it for the last several weeks that Iowa's offense and success therein, especially in the month of September, will be dependent on how much they can run the ball, how much of a push that offensive line gets. So I was disappointed early. I know a lot of people look at the result and they say, oh, more of the same early. But again, I think all of us can accept the fact that although I think play calling has been an issue, player development's been a problem, offensive line play has been a big problem. Kirk Ferentz is not wrong about that. And so this offense is going to be dependent on that offensive line getting a push. So I was disappointed early. You had a 3-and-out to start the game on both sides. Very typical for Iowa football. I believe Iowa followed it up with another 3-and-out. Don, I guess before I get to the rest of my comments, just your thoughts on the first two quarters of football, and how were you feeling, as the clock ticked to 0 at the end of the second, and it was 6-0?
Well, I was disappointed, of course, that we didn't show ourselves better in the first half. I give a lot of credit to Illinois State. I think they correctly recognized I was going to come out and try to run the ball, try to be sure that they control the line of scrimmage. So they were prepared for that. Excuse me. Here's a key play early in the game, something to think about. I believe it was second quarter, based on where it shows up on my note sheet here. 4th and 2, you might remember we failed. Came up a little bit short. We were right around midfield. And what got us in trouble on that particular play, we went unbalanced. So we only had we had tackle over, I guess. So we had a tight end. I can't remember if it was a tight end or not. Anyway, we only had 2 players on the left side from the center. Can't remember if it was a tight end. I believe it was unbalanced. So I think we had a lineman and the tight end on the short side of the field. They brought pressure off that short side of the field because, the more I think about it, it was tight end over. That's what it was. Here's what you had. You had a guard and a tackle, and that's it on the short side, on the left side of the formation. We were running the ball to the heavy side. The only problem with that, sometimes when you go in balance, you don't know what you're going to get. Well, I give Illinois State credit for having a good plan for it. Their plan was, if you want to go in balance, we're going to whistle somebody off the edge, off the weak side that you cannot block. That's the guy that hit us deep in the backfield. That slowed our effort to get across and gain 2 yards. The running back did a decent job.
Yes, he did.
I believe it was Kamari, wasn't it?
Correct.
Nice effort on his part, but he still came up a few inches short.
Yes.
So that was good football on their part, and I think they were correct to assume, let's do what we can to slow down Iowa, especially on early downs. And I was pleased to see, I think at the end of the half, I think we had 20 rush attempts, 17 pass attempts, which was better balance than what I expected we would have. But one reason we were throwing the ball is because we weren't running it very effectively. I think I did see, according to the TV people, 3.6 yards per carry at halftime on rushing plays. I did have somebody ask me before the game, "What's it, Coach? I know you commented. You're confident we're going to run the ball better. What would be a good goal to have for Illinois State?" Without even really hesitating too much, I said, "Well, I'd like to see 6 yards of carry." And of course, at halftime we had 3.6. I think against Big Ten opponents, I'd like to see 5 yards of carry. I don't know if we can do it. That was maybe optimistic. I think we could. I think at the end of the day, we ended up averaging 6.2. But of course, we had the benefit of a 64-yard run, too. That helps.
Yeah, I believe it was actually 6 on the dot. I'm looking at the box score here.
Gotcha.
6 on the dot. And can we just dispel something real quick? I want to address something that gets tossed out a lot when you start talking about rush averages done. Sometimes we hear, people, Caleb Johnson had a 64-yard. Let me answer that phone call real quick. We'll put this caller on hold. We'll be right back with you, caller. But Don, Caleb Johnson had a long 64-yard run. And sometimes people like to take away that one large outlier and say, well, let's look at their average without that. Can you do that?
No, cannot.
The game, and everybody's averages are impacted by the long and the short runs.
Correct.
So there's no world in which that is a normal thing to do when evaluating a performance, correct?
No, one thing you do look for, if you want to run the ball with great effectiveness, you don't rely so much on average per carry. You rely more on how often do you gain 4 yards or more.
Okay.
If you're consistently knocking out 5-6 yards, that's a great thing, of course, because you're going to be hard pressed to even get to third down.
So why isn't that on a box score? Why don't they, put 4+ yard runs on a box score?
Well,
that would
frankly,
be a stat to have.
It would be. I think what would throw that off maybe is I'm at a draw play for 10 yards on 3rd and 15. That affects the average too.
Sure.
But the general thing we're looking for on first down, 4 yards or more. Minimum of 4. That's the definition of a good running game. So now you're second and medium, and now they don't know what you're going to do.
So let me go back to my original question. I want to give this to you again. I know you talked about the 4th and 2 play that came up short. Kamari Moulton, I think, right now, based on what I saw yesterday, and people are going to disagree with me, I saw why he's number 1 on the depth chart. And it's not because Caleb Johnson was suspended. I think he's the best running back in the room right now. And I was saying the same thing about LeSean. At least yesterday, Kamari Moulton, to me, looked like the best running back in the room. Would you agree with that, Don?
I don't know. It's debatable. I'll say this, and now we know what the facts were, of course. Kamari started the game. Did he start because he had proven himself as the best back during camp, or did he start the game because number 2 wasn't available?
Well, hold on. Let's clear something out. Caleb has not been the starter. Has not ever been at the top of the depth chart. It's always, that's why. And one of our good callers who I
correct me if I'm wrong. Now, 2 years ago he was a starter in any number of games, right?
I think that's, yes. I think everybody's been a starter. I think Jazz Patterson was on number 1 on the depth chart at some point. That's another question. Where's Jazz Patterson? I don't know if that was asked of anybody yesterday. I didn't hear that question posed to Seth Wallace. But I guess the reason I want to ask that question is because, and one of our avid listeners reached out to me and said, hey, it makes sense as to why Kamari is at the top of the depth chart because Caleb Johnson is out. And I just want to clear that up because I understand where that individual is coming from when they say that. And if other people feel the same way, I get it. But LeSean has been the number 1 guy.
Right.
So there's no reason to believe that Kamari, why would Kamari skip Caleb? Why would he jump Caleb and LeSean just because Caleb is out with a suspension? You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah. And let me comment on the numbers. Let me comment on our rushing totals yesterday, individual rushing totals. I made the comment shortly after the game. I said, do not fall into the trap of strictly judging each of the individual backs and basing your thought process on yards per carry. I think what happened in that game, I think we did a good job of wearing down Illinois State. Defensively, we did a good job of wearing them down. It was a warm day, warmer than I expected. It was even warmer on the turf. I will guarantee you that a lot of those Illinois State players were exhausted with the way the game played out. So judging a rushing average in the first half is entirely different than judging a rushing average in the second half, simply because we were doing a better job of creating a lot of running room in the second half than we did the first.
So again, the 64-yard run for Caleb, obviously impressive. Don, his breakaway speed, we all know, and we have known that his breakaway speed is special. He's got that long stride. It obviously helps him once he gets in the open field. He's not your quick twitch back. He's never going to be that. I'd still like to see him get low. I understand it's more of a challenge when you're taller to get low, just like it was with Hayden Large at fullback. However, there are guys like Derrick Henry who get that job done, and I hope that's part of Caleb's growth as a running back. And, you know, it sounds like it was a violation of team rules as to the reason why he was suspended for the first half of the game yesterday. But I was impressed with Kamari Moulton in spite of the average looking like it does, because I do feel like things opened up more in the second half, and it didn't look to me like that was due to who was taking the ball from Cade McNamara's hands. So that would be my one observation, Don. As it relates to quarterback play, that's what I want to address next, because we've seen the numbers. They've been well publicized over the last 24 hours. Cade struggled early and often. He had a potential touchdown throw to Luke Lachey in the first half that was actually it was a good route by Luke. He had beaten the defender, and McNamara underthrows him in the end zone. Would have been
the defender, incidentally, was lined up as a linebacker. We had what we wanted. We had Wyseam versus a linebacker who was in a trail position, and we simply need to get the ball over that defender and give Luke a chance to extend for the ball and create a touchdown.
And he likely catches that. If it's put on the money, he likely catches that.
He very likely catches it. The ball was simply underthrown. I think the announcing crew mentioned he threw it off his back foot. That's true. Need to transfer your weight a little bit to be able to get the ball on target and not leave it short. He was left a little bit short, and of course that gave him a chance to play the ball.
There was another play later in the first half in which Cade McNamara threw. This was, I think, even a worse pass, low and behind Reese Vanderzee on a potential first down throw. That was another low light, if you will, for Cade in that first half. Second half, obviously, Cade was better. I was impressed with a couple of plays, even one that was called back due to I believe it was a holding penalty in which Cade rushed for like 20 yards. And you just saw his mobility. He's a little bit more comfortable with his feet right now than I would have expected for a guy who's coming off that serious knee injury. Don, I think that's a positive to take from what we saw out of Cade yesterday, is he seems more comfortable in the pocket, not only than what we would have expected with Cade, but more comfortable than any recent quarterback Iowa's had taking snaps.
Yeah, I think so. I think he started to gain confidence at the end of the first half. You know, we put up pretty good yardage there in the last 5 minutes, I'd say, the second quarter. Even though it was only 6-0, at least we started to move the ball a little more efficiently. And, of course, what made the difference in the game, let's back up as to how a penalty will affect the game. You might recall the second half kickoff, they received the penalty for a personal foul. As a result of that, we got to start off on the minus 40-yard line. Our first touchdown drive in the second half was only 60. Should have needed to be 75, right? Because we were going to take over on the 25. So that did help. But we had some nice plays. I want to give Tim a lot of credit for a couple of very well-conceived plays. Let me find them. I made a comment and gained confidence in the first half, early second half. Our counter helped our running game in the second half. We came out with that. We also unveiled a screen pass, even though we didn't throw one in the first half. That also helped. That was another 8 yards. But the 31-yard touchdown pass, that was the second in the quarter, wasn't it? Yeah. The second one, that was a well-conceived play because it looked like Gill was breaking outside, and then he broke back across the face of the safety and was open for a 31, is that right? Yeah, 31-yard touchdown. A very well executed play. It was properly envisioned. It was called in a good time, and we made them pay. A good throw, an excellent catch. Incidentally, Gill had a couple of really, really good catches in the game.
Yes,
So I'm impressed with him. It looks to me like he can be counted on to be a clutch receiver. Pretty obvious right now. If we're only going to put 2 wideouts on the field, and let's say right now, Corey, what our number one personnel group is, our number one personnel group, at least for this game, was very clearly 12 personnel. 1 back, 2 tight ends, which of course leaves room for 2 receivers. It was obvious those 2 receivers, in general, were going to be number 5 and number 15. Those are the guys that deserve to be out there if we were only putting 2 receivers out there. And it's pretty amazing that one of them's a true freshman. But he gave a good account of himself. At least he appears to be really reliable in catching a football. That's important. And of course, he really took Cade off the hook on that other touchdown pass, because that ball should not have been thrown. Frankly, we should have gotten out of the play. There were 2 rushers on the weak side, and we had 1 back to block them.
Can I address that real quick? And then we've got our caller that's been waiting for a while now, Don.
Sure.
I just want to address that throw by Cade, because the average football fan that watches that looks at it and they think, what a cool, great play. And that play could have easily been an interception. It was a terrible decision by Cade to throw into coverage. Not only is he throwing off his back foot, he's falling. It's like a Dirk Nowitzki type of fadeaway throw down the field. It was a bad decision with a guy in his face, and Reese Vanderzee just went up and got it. And that's a luxury to have, right? You have a receiver, especially a true freshman, that can go up and get that with his size. And obviously, again,
he did a good job of playing the ball. He did a good job of high pointing the ball. Fortunately for us, the Illinois State DBs did not do a good job of playing the ball. They were more preoccupied with covering receivers than finding the ball.
But that play had very little to do with Cade McNamara. I hate to say that. Like, that is not a good decision. That is a better play by Reese Vanderzee. So I just want to say that. I mean, again, Cade made some nice throws. I thought he made the touchdown throw to Jacob Gill. I mean, it just seemed to me yesterday, Don, and I understand we're talking about an FCS opponent, Missouri Valley Conference opponent. It was picked 5th in the conference. They are preseason top 25 in the league, or nationally in that division. But it did seem to me like there were more guys open than we've seen even in past opening week games, right? It just seemed like there were guys getting open. And we don't see that often.
You've heard me state that part of our problem is simply we're not getting great separation from defenders. Right. So part of the quarterback's problem is the receivers need to be better at what they do. And we took advantage of some mismatches in the game. But let me say, it's going to be a lot more difficult next Saturday, because ISU secondary's above average, I'll say for sure, in the Big 12.